Fans of Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, thank you very much for joining me for the 7th and final part of my build guide to constructing the Legion Fellblade super heavy tank by Forge World. And as you can see before us, looking rather splendid, the vehicle is pretty much complete now. And what a handsome looking tank this is. It's an absolute stunner. Yeah. It's definitely vying with top spot now for the glaive on my favourite looking vehicle. Aesthetics aside, what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about the final construction steps following on from part 6 of this tank, and then just have a few final finishing thoughts to wind out the series, and we're done. As usual, I'll do a full separate review where I talk about the build in very high broad general terms, and then the rules as well for using this in games of the Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take it apart a bit because we need to strip some bits down to get back to where we were at the end of part 6. Tracks, let's go back to the tracks. So in part 6, I got to the point where the side units were on and I was ready to start fitting the tracks. And I'd shown you how I'd attach the idler wheel to the front axle, and then talked about how I was planning to do this, and then talked about how I was planning to put the tracks on. So start here and work your way around to the back, which is essentially what I did, but with a few, shall I say, deviations from that. The way I started this process was getting these two track sections, which is part 1 and part 2, dry fit, and then putting this sprocket wheel in position, getting it lined up well, and then just sticking them here. So these then became a single piece, but still detached from this. So I did that first, and then, so at this point, I haven't stuck anything else onto the hull yet. I got the 3 lower track pieces. This is parts 4, 5, and 6, and 7 ready. And in effect did the same thing. So again, doing a hold fit with this, I stuck these 2 pieces together and this piece together. And of course I had to get this one involved as well. And the reason I did that is to ensure the best continuity of alignment and fit all the way around, because this is a resin kit. The fit is, shall we say, looser than a plastic model, and there's a risk if you kind of start sticking pieces from one end that when you get to the other that you've got something that doesn't quite line up. So that's why I consider these as 2 sub-assemblies, the underside and then the overside. Once assembled, obviously I had to be careful with handling those because you have quite a fragile attachment just here and here and here. But that said, it did work very well. And if you go on my Twitter feed, and you'll have to go back a couple of weeks, there are a few pictures I posted of those in construction. Once that was done, was there anything else? Yes, there was something else. There was one other important thing with these road wheels. Now there's some kind of plastic guides that stick in on the wheels, and they're designed to locate onto these tracks. I found that they obstructed the fit. So what I did is I just simply cut all those away. So I got a pair of snippers, cut them all off, and that helped me get a better alignment as well, because if you have those in place, they restrict how much movement you've got back and forth on the track. So yeah, those inner guide plastic, I don't know what you call them, knobs or whatever, I'll cut those away to help you line this up. You don't need them there for getting a secure attachment. You've got all these contact points on the road wheels, and you've got here and here. So there's plenty of strength there. You don't actually need those for any strength. So that's the other thing to do, take those away to help you with fitting those. So then I stuck it all together. That was, I guess, pretty straightforward in the end. I did this sub-assembly first, I think. When I put the glue on that, I held this in place for dry fit. I then glued that on and attached it here. I then went and stuck the sprocket wheels on next, and I glued them, and of course this was glued at this point, and I then dry fit this sub-assembly of tracks to then get the alignment right on that rear sprocket wheel, and they both came out looking rather smart, I thought. So that actually went really well, and for all the faffing around, test fitting, heat bending that had gone on for hours and hours beforehand, it all paid off when it came to actually putting the tracks on. It really did help, and it went together really well, and the end result I think looks brilliant. Very neat, square and true alignment all the way around, and in particular I was really proud of the fit that I got around this assembly, and I think this is the hardest place to get everything looking square and true. And at this point I just want to bring in my other Fellblade chassis tank to show you why I did a better job here. So here we've got my Legion glaive. Why was it better? When I built this and after I'd assembled it, well, the general fit I got around here was pretty good. We can see there's a bigger gap here, and the gap on this side between the axle mount and the idler wheel is probably twice what is on this side. And likewise, if we look at the track there and there, where it butts up against this plastic hull section, there's a wider gap on this side. Not sure if there was any. I think the rear fit was okay. The reason for that was all the faffing around I had with getting this piece here seems to come intrinsically quite bent and distorted for the actual kit fit. And as I detailed in quite a lot of depth in my previous videos, I had to do loads of work with this track side, which is the left-hand side, to get a good fit. And I suspect that that's a bit of an intrinsic feature of this kit. And if you're going to get a good fit on this, you've got to do quite a bit of work on this to work out all the bends and get, just get that snug fit in against a hull. I was really pleased in a better result on this one. I mean, that's not to say that that's a bad one. I mean, I'm still very happy with the glaive, but if you are looking to get it together as best as you can, that was something I did better on this one than I did on my original attempt. At this point, the model is essentially done. All the hard work is complete. It's mainly just the detail. So let's go through those details. So there is the hull-mounted demolisher cannon, which is a pretty straightforward ball and socket mount. This mounting plate was quite distorted on mine, so I had to just heat bend that into position and do a bit of filing to get a square fit, but that got there pretty well. I was pleased with that. Got the smoke stacks, or the exhaust stacks, on the power pack. They were pretty straightforward. When you stick those on, one watch out is just to make sure you get them level on the vertical, because as you can see, the power pack isn't quite true. It bows in a bit on the underside, and there's a little bit of a bone on the upper side. I think that's due to suction with the moulding, or there's been some distortion in this. I compared it against the glaive and it's the same, so it seems to be something of an intrinsic character to this kit. There's these two exhaust pipes, or conduits perhaps, which go on there. They're pretty straightforward to fit. I heated them up a bit, just manipulated and bent them to get the best position. Pretty straightforward stuff. You've got these clips, and there's three. 1, 2, 3. That kind of like, they're almost like they're holding the track side on, or part of the strength of it holding on. I found that the fit on those wasn't that great on most of them. This one was fine. This one had a gap, as you can see now. I've put some milliput filler in there. On this side, however, the gaps were much more pronounced. I was a bit in two minds what to do. What I ended up doing was I recut the top on the upper hull armour to recess the parting, because I couldn't take away much material there because you got the rivet details. So what I figured out was the easiest thing to do was to cut the recesses back, and I was able to do that because the gap was the same on those two, so they kind of went aligned quite nicely. Whereas on this side, there was only one, they didn't fit that well. I don't know. I just like clean, smooth lines. We don't like gaps that don't look like they should be there. And by means of comparison, if we get our friend the glaive again, we can see the very gap there that I was talking about, and also there. I mean, it's not terrible, but it can, as I showed, you can get a really snug fit if you so desire. Now, let's move on to the laser destroyer, or the quad las cannon sponsons. What I did is I magnetized these, and the reason I magnetized them is for ease of transport. This is a wide tank. I use KR multicase for transporting my models around, and with these las cannon sponsors on, rather wide for the actual tray, so I magnetize them. Also help with painting them as well. I stuck the mounting ring on. There's a pin inside which you're supposed to stick to here for it to rotate. I just stuck it in place. I then drilled in and put magnets in here and in here, and those are, I think those are 5x1mm magnets, N52 grade. And I put, how many did I put? I think I put 2 in here, which is, I had to be very careful with drilling the depth there. That's why thin magnets are good for these, because it's quite a shallow hole. And I think I put 3 in here, and that gave a pretty decent strength attachment. So yeah, not going to come off easily. That'll do quite fine. In terms of the actual quad laser cannons themselves, let's just take a look at one. These are they fiddly to build? Well, I suppose they are a little bit fiddly, and there is a bit of heat bending required. I mean, you stick these 2 twin laser cannons together, and then you've got this bracket which mounts around it, and then you put the targeting cogitator in the top, and then this bracket in the bottom here, which has got a tube attached to it, and they've got pins that go into here, so you have to glue carefully if you want it to rotate. I mean, clearly if you don't want it to rotate, no worries at all. You do have to do some heat bending to get these pipes aligned and attached into these 2 sockets at the back. The way I did this is, before I stuck this pin in, I stuck one of these comes attached, one of them you stick on. I stuck the other one on so that both pipes are on, then heated it up in water, and one after another, I couldn't do them at the same time, so you haven't got enough time with heat bending them. I put them into position. Very good, looks good, and then you stick it, and then finally you just stick this piece on here. And you have to remember not to glue this end, because otherwise it won't rotate if you're trying to rotate it. I had to heat up and manipulate the bracket a little bit on both sides just to get that true as well. And here's the other side, and exactly the same thing reversed. Not that it matters much, but this little nub here is supposed to point forwards. The instructions aren't very clear, but I did a bit of research, looked at the studio models, and that's how they assemble them. So yeah, that points forwards. So let's bob those on. Next thing is the doors. So there's 2 doors that mount on. These are blue tacked in position at the moment, so I've got a little bit more work to finish on these. Now, you have to sand these down a bit to get a fit, because the apertures are just a little bit too small for the doors, or the doors are a little bit too big for the aperture, whichever way you want to look at it. And then I also bought some of these brand spanking new iron hands doors, which look really good, but there's a problem. And this is a design oversight on Forgewald's part. You will see that these new Legion specific doors have got this internal panel, which is about 1 millimeter thick on the inside. The problem with that is the mounting aperture is designed for a completely flat door. So as it stands, this won't sit flush. So I've got 2 options what to do here. Either, and well, both are going to require some extra work, I think. Either I mount it so it stands a bit proud, like so. If I do that, I then have to put a spacer on this one to make it look even on both sides. Or my alternative is to sand this down. And that's going to be quite a slow, faffy process. To basically, just give it the actual door thickness and get rid of the spacer. That's a bit disappointing, actually. And, Forgewald have clearly not done all their homework when they sculpted these new Rhino doors, because they failed to check the fit on the Fellblade chassis tanks. And I think all of these new doors are the same. Yeah, an oversight on their part. That concludes everything with regards to assembling the hull, I think. Oh, sorry, yeah, there are a couple of more parts. Actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. You've got these here, the mud guards, and then these little doohickeys that basically box off a couple of Gothic louvres, which are here. Basically, we don't want it to look like a driving church like a Fellblade is slightly styled on. These are a tricky fit. They're very tight, so I had to do a little bit of work, carefully cutting and sanding to get a fit here. I think the work was done on this outside peg. So yeah, you do need to do that, otherwise you might not be able to get it to fit. No, I don't think I could actually get mine on until I'd done that, so a bit of extra work to do there, but that said, it's all fine when it's done. Yeah. That really is all the hull now. Let's move on and talk about the turret. Right, so the turret, the gorgeous looking Fellblade turret. Right, there's quite a lot to talk about here. So firstly, I've not stuck the gun on yet, and we'll see why in a moment. And we're going to take away the accessories, so we don't get distracted by those. Right, there's not much to do on the hull, apart from a general prep and sanding. There's a bit of filler I had to put on there to get the shape right. You get a mould seam that runs around the edge here. It does, I think, yeah, it goes all the way around. So you need to sand that down very carefully as to not distort the shape of the turret. So it's got this nice curve to it. The main piece of work here is attaching the stowage bin, or perhaps what is the ammunition storage bin for the main gun. Or maybe even it's communication equipment, but it looks like it's storage. The fit on this is rather ambiguous. The guide is these two brackets here, and they should align like so. Again, the instructions don't give a good guidance on this because they're too dark, and in particular what it should look like around here. So I went and I looked at the studio models and checked those out and just tried to figure out how they'd done it. And eventually I deduced it's supposed to go like this, and you're looking for kind of like an even amount of raised stuff all the way around, and then it fits and it looks pretty, you know, pretty true and square. To get that, I had to heat this up and I had to bend this bit down at the front. So kind of like I had to get it and just rotate it forwards a bit or down a bit, because otherwise it was jutting up and you didn't have an even lip all the way around. But as I say, having checked out some studio models I took photos of and are on Forge World's website, this is how they built it, and it seems to be how it's supposed to line up. But as I say, the fit on that is ambiguous, so you're going to need to do some work to get that in position. Right. Next thing, let's talk about the main guns. So the main guns, I mean, yeah, fab looking weapons, they're really cool. A lot of careful cleanup to do on these cooling fins, or perhaps recoil absorbers. When you get these, do check them and make sure that you don't have any mold slips, because if I've seen ones with mold slips down here and it looks absolutely dreadful. If you do care about getting the final alignment good on these, do check that with the example that you buy. A bit of final work to do on this, which I've not got around to yet, is I'm going to drill out these, I'm going to call them baffles, because we had a debate on a previous video as to whether or not a railgun would have a muzzle brake or not. So I'm going to call them baffles for the moment, but I'm going to drill those out and I'm going to cut out these apertures on the side, so I think that'll look really good. I've not seen it done on a Fellblade before, so it should be a first. In terms of mounting, you've got a very straightforward attachment like that, and you can mount the gun from level, and you could, with a little bit of sanding, you could actually get it pointing down if you really want it, and it points all the way up to about there. A good range of motion, that. Quite like that. Yeah, about there. I'm quite tempted to do it with the gun sticking in the air. I don't know, it looks a bit crazy perhaps, but I like the look of it. Right, and that just finally leaves us to briefly touch on the turret furniture, as we might call it. So you get crew. I'm only going to show you one of the crew. You get crew for both positions. So you get one guy kind of like poking his head and his shoulders out, and then you get this guy who's poking his head and arms out. You get shoulder pads for him. I'm leaving them off because I don't think it looks right on a tank dude, and I just couldn't imagine how he could fit in and out of the hatch with those great big pauldrons on. So he's going there. Lovely model with the bionic arm, particularly for me as an Iron Hands player. You know, he's got his trusty bolt pistol there, a Phobos pattern bolt pistol. So yeah, I'm putting him in this position as opposed to that position. The reason for that is I've got one of these really nice remote weapon positions or mini turrets that Spellcrow Miniatures do. Spellcrow sent me this for the last set of sample reviews. So because you can put a pintle mounted weapon on the Fellblade, that's what I'm going to do. And I just think it looks absolutely awesome with that secondary turret. And if you know anything about modern armour, these things are all the rage at the moment and becoming increasingly common, these remote weapon stations. So I just love the look and I just really like how that ties in. A little bit of conversion work to do on that. I had to cut a notch in the back to accommodate the hinge from the polar. I suppose alternatively you could cut that away, but I'm doing it this way. And then a cupola hatch, and you get two of those. So you get one of those. So if you wanted, you can make the model with hatches closed, so buttoned up. And there you have it, the completed Fellblade, well, more or less, apart from those few minor detail cosmetic items. It really is an absolutely amazing looking tank. I always thought the glaive was my favourite, but I don't know, having got this now, I'm tending a bit more towards the Fellblade is my favourite. It was the original of the Fellblade chassis tanks, came out with Book 1, Horus Heresy, Betrayal. So a few concluding remarks. Well, I'm not going to go over the whole build of this again, but I just thought I'd share a few thoughts in summary with regards to building this. I guess the first thing is the end result is fantastic. It's a very complicated kit without a shadow of a doubt. The fact that it is a resin plastic hybrid increases the construction challenge to a considerable degree because you're interfacing those parts, and the plastic parts have no give, so you've got to make the resin fit the plastic. The kit is well designed, it does seem to work pretty well. The instructions are, well, this is what I often say, this is my new shall I say catchphrase with regards to Forge World instructions. They show you where all the parts go, but not necessarily in the correct order, and I would strongly advise you go back over my set of videos if you've got one of these guys and just review how I sequence a build, and don't just follow the instructions as they're presented, because you can make some really big boo-boos if you do. It's not an easy kit. I think that's an important thing to bear in mind with this. If you're going to get one, just think about the challenge it presents. Yeah, it's an expensive model as well. What does this cost? £180 I think now. Yeah, so it's an expensive model, so you don't want to make a mess of it. More than anything, the important aspect of building this is to take your time. I can't stress enough the importance of doing lots of push fitting at every stage of construction, because it needs it, and there's all sorts of little quirks and quibbles and oddities that are going to be in these parts when they come out of the molds, and to get it together you're going to need to put right. I think as well, quite often with Forge World kits there's degrees to which you can assemble them, you know, how well you assemble them. Some of them you can put together pretty well, even if you don't perhaps work out all the warps and kinks and stuff, they will go together. I think this is a different proposition though. I think if you don't work the warps and the kinks out, you are going to have some real problems, and these tracks are just going to swallow you up, chew you and spit you out, because they're hard to do and you've got to get those kinks and warps out. But all that said, I'm not trying to put you off buying one of these. I'm just trying to give you an appreciation for the modelling challenge involved. But what's the old phrase? Keep your eyes on the prize, and the final model is certainly worth the effort of building it. And fundamentally, there is nothing wrong with the kit. It is a good kit. I've not had to do any modifications to this. Everything has fit together eventually. You know, quite a lot of heat work and manipulation, but it has all fit together, and it's fit together really well. Other Forge World kits I've had have not intrinsically properly fit together. So if you are interested, you know, you want to have a go at one, you know, I'd say definitely go for it. You know, and all you guys and girls have got the benefit now of the 7 videos that I've made about building this. So you can go and watch those and perhaps fall victim to some of the quirks of this kit, can benefit from experience and hopefully make your build process easier and more enjoyable. There are a few articles around the net on it. A fellow YouTuber, Mike over at cruroangleussilisis, has bought one of these as well, and I know it's on his list of projects to do. So if you've not subscribed to his channel, he does some really good Forge World build, painting, sort of hobby log videos. I'll leave a link in the description, but it'd be probably worth keeping an eye out on his channel for when he builds his, just to see what his experience is like, and maybe he'll come up with some cool ideas that I haven't. I'm sure he will. So that rounds out my series on assembling the Legion Fellblade Super Heavy Battle Tank. I hope you found it entertaining, and above all, I hope you found it useful in your hobby. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and observations on this handsome tank and the build. Please do share those in the comment section. But apart from that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.